Well, the St. Louis Blues have had a quite literally an up and down start to November, and they've had some disappointing goaltending at times from Jordan Binnington and Joel Hofer this season. So if the goaltending continues to struggle, what does that mean for the Blues this season? Is the season a lost cause? Would it even impact the retool? But on the other hand, what if they turn it around? Could the Blues make a playoff push plus an exciting Note News announcement? All that and more on today's episode of Note News. Well, we've got an interesting exercise today. We're going to talk about, as I said, Joel Hofer and Jordan Binnington, the Blues goalies, and sort of entertain a couple different scenarios around the Blues goaltending and what it means for the wider team. And we've got an exciting announcement that I'll get to in a second. But before that, if you are new to Note News, we'd appreciate if you would like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow and rate the podcast wherever you listen, whether it's Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And you can also follow along with us on socials. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Note News Pod, where we post a lot of other cool stuff. So be sure to follow along there for updates and announcements and things like that, including, drum roll, Alec.
I don't want to break my mic.
Next week, Note News is going to start live streaming our episodes. We don't know the exact day yet. That is TBD. So we will be sure to update if we have a video before then. And we will be sure to update 100% on our socials. So again, date and time is TBD, but it will be next week. So if you want to follow along with us in real time, ask us questions during episodes and answer any questions that we might pose to you all, the viewers, the listeners, and more stuff like that, be sure to tune in live. It'll be on YouTube starting next week, as I said, and we'll do our best to make that a sort of a regular feature on Note News. We might not do it for every single episode to start out with, but I think the goal is to get there. So we're going to start doing that. Like I said, hopefully early next week, date TBD, updates to come. You excited about that, Alec?
Yeah. And we read and appreciate all your guys' comments on socials and on YouTube.
Yeah.
And so it's a fun opportunity to hop in with us live and get asking on how you feel about the Blues, get our thoughts in the moment, because John and I put so much work into the prep of the show. No, I'm kidding. Also to note, if you like miss the live streams or whatever, they're still going to be posted as normal everywhere. So don't worry about that. If you can't make it or have no interest, then for you all listeners, then the content will be unchanged.
Yes. Audio will still continue to be uploaded as normal. YouTube videos will be uploaded after the streams. But if you want to interact with us as we record, that's a great way to do it. Or get it straight from the horse's mouth, as it were. So we're really excited about that. And we really do want it to be as interactive as we're sort of able to make it while still putting together like an actual podcast. So we hope to see y'all on there. Why don't we jump into this discussion? This is an exercise that I've wanted to do for a little while. And we're not just doing it because some of the underlying numbers are pointing to Jordan Binnington and Joel Hofer maybe not having as spectacular a season as they did collectively last year. I think we're doing it because these two players are so important to this Blues team. And I think it's worth exploring what it would mean for the Blues if they don't have a good season, or if they're able to turn it around, what it can mean. So we're going to entertain a couple of those scenarios. Sort of the big question is, what if the goaltending isn't good? But I think it's really important to have a disclaimer here at the beginning before we get into it. Big, giant disclaimer. We do not think Joel Hofer and Jordan Binnington are bad goalies. And I think what I'm trying to say is I do not. I think on this episode, you're going to see a lot of me playing the devil's advocate and a lot of Alec sticking up for these guys. So I guess when I say we, I'm talking about me. We have talked at length about how much we like these two guys. And we don't think they're bad goalies. Again, however, their seasons thus far have been somewhat disappointing on a few different levels. So the point of what we're doing on this episode is to discuss, entertain the scenarios of what it would mean for the Blues this season if the goalies aren't performing like we know they are capable of. The season is very young, so they can turn it around. They're good players, and this is an exercise. So big giant disclaimer. Um, yes, that's what I'm going with. And I think like being where we are at the beginning of the season, the performance you have, like obviously that's all you have to judge. Like right, if there was a slump in the middle of the season, um, it doesn't quite affect the full season numbers as much, right? But when this is like the only sample size you have right out of the gate, it can be easy to overreact to it, which is why I'm saying, again, I don't think they're bad. I just think it's worth talking about. So um, we can get into some of like the basic goalie numbers first here. Um, let's start with Jordan Binnington, obviously the number one goalie for the Blues. His save percentage this year, and I think the numbers vary honestly. Like depending on where you get your information. I'm using like Money Puck and Hockey Reference for most of my numbers today. Both, may I say, very esteemed sites to get hockey data from, unlike Alec, where he got his information. um,
Wow, starting early.
um, Jordan Binnington so far this season, as I said, his save percentage is 886, not too good. His goal saved above expected, another goalie metric that a lot of people like to use. His goal save above expected is negative 3.3, which is the 13th worst in the NHL out of like I think 72 goalies. And he's got the 22nd highest goals against average at 3.28. Now you play a couple games like the ones against Ottawa and Washington recently. They put up 8 against you. It's going to skew some of those numbers, of course. But those are the numbers so far. For Joel Hofer, his save percentage, I just had it, is 903, so not quite as bad through 5 games. Let me say that too. Jordan Binnington has 11 games, games played, 10 starts, and Joel Hofer has 5 games. His save percentage, as I said, 903, and his goals save above expected is the 9th worst in the league at negative 3.8. He's got the 20th highest goals against average at 3.33. So those are some of their numbers. Before we sort of dive into like entertaining scenarios and stuff like that. Alec, do you want to talk a little bit about like what we've seen this season, like what we have, the concrete information we have about these two goalies before we start to get into some hypotheticals? What are you seeing from these guys?
Sure. I think starting at a default baseline stat level, the save percentage is a pretty good stat to rely on for just a very general look at these guys. And yeah, 886 is really bad for a starting goaltender. 903 for a backup goaltender is actually okay, but Hofer's goals against average is higher at 333. Now, GAA isn't some people's favorite stat, some people being me, but and that one isn't just to fit my narrative. That one actually, anyways, because it gets skewed from games that like we saw in Ottawa and in. So, anyways, save percentage is a good representative, all-encompassing stat, and it's been disappointing for both of them. I think, especially with the expectations on Hofer, a 903 is okay, but it's really not where you want to see. What we've seen, I feel like this season, with a couple noticeable, and very noticeable exceptions, I think this season we've seen a little bit more toughness, especially at least from Binnington, where it felt like if he gave up a bad goal in a game, then the floodgates were open and you just had to really put the pressure on offensively to have any chance at that point. With this season so far, for the most part for Binnington, is there's been a lot more consistent run of not entirely blowing up. Of course, there are a couple very bad exceptions that shouldn't just be thrown out, but it's happening, once every 2 weeks at most, which is really not that bad. With Hofer, that has been a little bit of a worry, is that he'll look really settled in, really dialed in, but then lets in a bad one that just happens, gets beat, whatever it is, and he hasn't as much had that mental toughness to recenter and reset and stay dialed into the game. And I think that's been the struggle for Hofer that I've seen so far.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, like the biggest example of that being the Ottawa game, right, where he got pulled after playing 31 minutes and giving up 5 goals. Um, so that is, I think, the like main example of his season so far that is like that. But to his credit, for the most part, it hasn't been that bad. His first start against San Jose gave up 4. The Blues came back and won that one, but still wasn't great. And then he did have that shutout against the Islanders, which was his best game of the season. Obviously, not giving up any goals is better than giving up a lot of goals. So uh, it has been. I mean, it has been kind of up and down for both of these guys. Like Jordan Binnington looks like a Vezina winner when he plays the Toronto Maple Leafs. Um, he he did so good in both of those games, but I just feel like the consistency isn't there. And what where I'm sort of scared, I guess, would be, or maybe not scared, but like what I'm looking out for is obviously how this progresses because um, it's looking like a concerningly similar season, at least start to the season, thus far, as his 22-23 season, which was one that was not so good. So um, that's what
Let
I'm looking
me
for.
not to entirely dissuade that fact. I just
Hmm.
want to I'll sort of pull these stats on the fly here, but
Yeah.
let me just read Binnington's game logs because I think contextualizing it is important to at least how
Hmm.
I feel about these goalies' performance and why I'm actually not entirely worried about Binnington or Hofer for that matter. So Binnington, as you said, has played 11 games. In those games, he gave up in order 2 goals, 4 goals against Vegas, 3 goals,
Hmm.
3 goals, 1 goal, 4 goals against Montreal, 3 goals, 2 goals, 2 goals, 2 goals, 8 goals against Washington.
Hmm.
So that is, let's see, one, two, three, four games giving up 2 goals, 5 games giving up 2 or less goals, 3 games giving up 3 goals, and 2 games giving up 4 goals. So just on the sort of bell curve of performances, there's been a lot more. Giving up 2 goals in a game is a very like 2 thumbs up, great performance if you ask me. Giving up 3 goals in a game is still manageable. I think that's baseline starter play, and that hasn't even been the majority of Binnington seasons. So I think there's been a couple also. Uh, okay, I will try and make this the only time that I say this because I don't want to entirely toss away any analysis we do here. The defense has been really letting these guys down, specifically on rush chances and on unblocked shots and on odd man breaks, odd man opportunities. The Blues have been very bad at limiting those chances this year,
Hmm.
but we have to provide some analysis here, and so I'm not just going to write off everything. But given the difficult situation that he's played in, I still think that's an okay level of play that doesn't have me freaking out just yet.
That's fair. You sort of started to talk about it there, and this is one of the big questions I think we should answer um, before we dive into uh, entertaining what if they're bad, what if they're good, is this big question of how much of this is because of the Blues defense and how much is the goaltending, right? You sort of started to give your take there, maybe putting it more on the defense. And I think that's fair. Like we have talked a lot about how just not up to snuff with the rest of the league, or at least the good teams in the league. This Blues defensive core is obviously a fantastic start to the season from Philip Broberg. Colton Parayko has been pretty good. Justin Falk has been pretty good, and then Ryan Suter has been a highlight of the early season. But beyond those four, you're not getting much. And I mean, even from those four, it's not what you'd like it to be. What you're getting from Colton Parayko and Ryan Suter is good, but I think it's probably more of a second pair kind of a thing, is what I'd say. But anyways, um, I mean, just looking at some team statistics, the Blues have, as of today, when we're recording this on November 11th, they've got the eighth worst expected goal share at 46.24%. Not where you want to be at all on that. And they've also got the seventh worst goal differential, although I lost that. Here, I'll get it in 1 second. They've got a -9. But you get outscored 8-1 twice. I mean, that'll
That
happen.
goal
That
differential is
that
going to be
that
bad. Yeah.
for sure. So taking that with a grain of salt. I think the expected goal share stat is the bigger takeaway here. They're just when they're on the ice, and this is at 5-on-5 is what I'm saying. This when they're on the ice, they are giving up way too many good chances, and not generating enough on
One
their own.
more one more stat on that point. They are
Yeah,
eighth in the league in unblocked shot attempts against, so just not defensively. Eighth worst, I'll say.
eighth
Eighth
worst.
worst
Yeah,
in the league at unblocked shot attempts against. So real
yeah,
poor.
not
At five
good.
on five. Sorry.
Yes, yeah, not good. So Alec, I guess I'll just ask you straight. I mean, is it the defense? Is the defense more to blame than the goaltending here?
It's a tough question to answer. It feels like a night by night thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's more a defense thing. But the thing is, I don't think it's like defense against the cycle or whatever. I don't think it's defense against long extending plays and kind of the percent chances you expect to. For me, at least in my viewing, it feels like it's rush chances. And every night, I feel like there's just so many unmitigated mistakes with like sloppy
Yeah.
passes through the neutral zone or just not counting numbers or defensemen being unsafe with pucks. I think it's been rush defense has just been unplayable, maybe not unplayably bad, but atrocious.
Yeah, and I think that's fair, and I'd agree that more of what we're seeing is like miscues with the puck, than like you said, like defending a setup play or something like that. Um, and I'd agree. I mean, like we talked about just the number of like giveaways that this team had. I think we talked about Jordan Kyrou and Pavel Buchnevich and the amount of giveaways that they've got. Jordan Kyrou in
They've
particular being
cleaned it up
a
since
pretty
then.
nasty one. They have, but I mean, it's not just them. And the Blues are just giving it
Scott
away too
Perunovich,
much.
man.
And he scored though.
Sorry, shouldn't be singling out anyone.
Um,
It's a lot of bad.
yeah, and yeah, I mean, I think the reality is, and this is probably why it's tough to say like definitively either way. I think the reality is this is a shared thing as far as the results so far. It really is defense and goaltending. I think I'd probably put it more on the defense, especially like even in those first few games. Like we talked back then about how Nick Leddy was just looking so sloppy and just on both sides wasn't looking good. And he's not the only one, but you have a few key defensemen making that many mistakes that often. There's only so much your goaltending can do. And then with a game like the 8-1 loss to the Capitals, they just like gave up. They just stopped playing and I don't know, just kind of conceded and were like, well, I guess we'll let Ovechkin get as many goals as he can.
Hmm.
It was only two, but still. And
I mean, to do that in an NHL game is disgraceful. Like
yeah,
truly.
sure thing. One stat that I found that was interesting, um, and I'm not quite sure like what the full implications are of this, but like I think an argument can be made that this is a case against the goaltending. I guess when you look at the goals against above expected in the league, the Blues have the sixth most goals against above expected at 6.06. Um, and what that says to me is that despite not giving up too many high danger shots, too many high danger chances. Um, the goals are getting in. And I think that speaks more to a goaltending issue than to a defensive issue. Um, when you're not
Yep.
generating that many expected goals, I think that's a sign of good defense. And then if you've got that many goals against above expected, that looks more like goaltending to me. If
Hmm.
anyone has a different interpretation of that stat, I'd be willing to hear it. But that's sort of how I read that. I thought that stood out a little bit, but I think the reality is a little more nuanced in that it's probably a little bit of both. Um, do you wanna start to dive into our scenarios, or do you have any more notes on what we've seen so far this season from these two?
The only other note I wanted to mention, which could be considered a point against your last, but I think it's as you said, there's a lot more to it than just one thing or the other.
Hmm. Hmm.
Is so we've been using a lot of stats from Money Pucks databases as well as just general like
Hmm.
hockey track stats, that are
Yeah.
posted everywhere. So per IC Data, their database, a different stat sheet, just to get a different voice. Hofer actually has a positive goals saved above average. For him, it's at 1.94, which is not exceptional by any means, but it is positive and it is not not terrible. And Binnington's is negative. It is at a negative 0.89. But even then, that's still not that far down the list, as it were. The worst are well, the worst is a negative 10, Caden Primo, but that's a kind of skewed. The worst are all in like negative 2, 3, 4, and Bennington hasn't even cracked negative 1. So not necessarily saying that this is totally gospel either, just giving another viewpoint to that you can make your own conclusion as you will.
Yeah, it's fair. I did want to point out one other stat just because it's interesting, and it's sort of more, I guess, more damning for Hofer and more of like a good on you for Binnington, and it's how these guys have performed on the penalty kill. So while the other team is on the power play, Jordan Binnington actually has done okay. He's got 1.5 goals saved above expected, which is the 15th best in the league. So it's not terrible. I mean, he's doing okay on the penalty kill. But Joel Hofer, um, on the other hand, has been more. He's struggled more. He's got negative 2.9 goals saved above expected, which is the fifth worst in the league. So again, that could just be a fault of the Blues special teams in Hofer's case, but like I don't know if you'd see that much variance if it was a special teams if that much variance goalie to goalie if it was a special teams issue and um, not a goalie issue. But I don't know, man. It's
This
it's
is
just I mean Hofer has half as many starts, and so
that's true.
that's part of it. But I mean, like looking at like NHL Edge stats, Jordan Binnington, he's like below 50th percentile in goals against average, overall save percentage, high danger save percentage. Um, it's just been a rough start, I think, for him. And part of why we have to do this is because we know he's capable of more, and I think he's a good goalie. That's not what I'm saying here. I'm just saying it just has been a rough season so far. And I
Yeah.
think he is. I think both of them are perfectly capable of turning it around. We saw them both have fantastic seasons last year. We know what Jordan Binnington is capable of. Um, we saw it in 2018-19, and then again in 2019-2020, and then we saw it again last year, right? And for that matter, 22 or 2021 as well. He's had a lot of good seasons. This just hasn't been one of them quite yet. I think he can get there. And then Joel Hofer, of course, mostly unproven, but had a fantastic year last year. I think he can turn it around too. We love Joel Hofer here. Um,
Hmm.
we still think they should pay the man, extend him. Um,
For sure.
but thinking about the Blues as a team and their plans for this season and beyond, I think it's worth asking these questions of what if the goaltending is bad. So do you want to start, or what if the goaltending is good? Do you want to start with the bad and then maybe end on a lighter note, like we like to do here?
Sure. Yeah.
All right, let's do that. So if the goaltending is bad, what does that mean for the Blues this season? Alec, do you think the playoffs are kind of a lost cause? I mean, a lot of the Blues' success last year was because of these guys. Um, so if it's bad this season, do you see them making the playoffs? Because I don't.
I think there is a little bit of like it a little bit depends on how bad, obviously, but I agree with you,
Hmm.
because
Let's just say if it's like about where it is right now, which isn't great.
yeah.
A lot.
So coming into the year, I had the Blues missing the playoffs, and it would really take something for it would take me seeing something exceptional to put them over into that conversation. Now, when we had Philip Broberg playing like he was, Kyron Buchnevich playing like they were, Thomas, etc., that was exceptional. That was better than I expected it to be.
Hmm.
Now that we're not seeing that, if our strengths are no longer our strengths, then I think there is almost no doubt in my mind that the Blues will not be in the playoff hunt if things don't improve.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, like I said, sort of when I was asking the question, um, like Binnington and Hofer were so central to, excuse me, to the Blues' success last year, that if both of them are struggling, it's just hard to see it's just hard to see how the team as currently constructed could make that push. Maybe Robert Thomas comes back and he's unbelievable. Maybe Philip Broberg comes back and he picks right up where he left off. I think there also is something to be said for the absence of these two guys who were big pluses on defense. And so I think once you get these two back, it could change some things. But I think I'd agree that if they aren't able to regress in a positive sense back to the mean or back to sort of somewhere in the range of where they were last year, it might not look too good. Might not look too good for this season. And I, on the other hand, did have them squeaking into the playoffs with a wild card spot. Um, but that was also contingent on my high hopes for Binnington in particular. So that would be tough if they aren't able to turn it around. But
I will say on a very, I know we're mostly getting on the bad, but I just can't help myself, I guess. We are still like I will probably be continually making this point throughout the month. Essentially, it hasn't looked pretty, and in fact, it has looked ugly. It has looked incredibly ugly. But the Blues are in a weird way still kind of where we asked them to be. They're hanging around 500. They're not, I mean, they're not competitively losing, but they're competitively winning games, in the games that they have won. You know, we're only one game under a 500 points percentage, and we are one win behind a not just a wild card spot, but a divisional spot. Now, to be fair, the Dallas Stars have two less games played, so technically not really. But even then, we are 1 point behind the wild card two spot, who the Edmonton Oilers have the same number of games played. So they are still very much hanging around, and I do mean like within a single night's worth, we could see these standings entirely flip on their head. So that is something to be held against our us both counting them out if the goaltending doesn't improve
for
for
sure,
those listeners looking for a positive.
yeah, I mean, for sure, and I think that we're just not like far into this stage of the season where we'll be without Robert Thomas and Philip Broberg, two very important players for this team, and we don't have like the big picture of how this team will adjust quite yet. So, like you said, they're hanging in there, and I think if they're able to tread water, then when these guys get back, it could be a
Which
different
they
story.
kind of are.
Kind of are
I know it doesn't look good.
2-2 so far in November.
Yeah, I know it
Um,
doesn't look good, but they technically kind of are treading water.
yeah, yeah. Like, you ever try to like tread water with just your legs? Like if you're holding something and it's like
That's true.
you can kind of like keep it up, but it's like it's hard. That's that's what we're
That's a
seeing.
good comparison.
um, Let me ask you this, and it might be a little more grim, a little more sad, but like if the goaltending gets worse. Let's say it gets worse. Particularly, Joel Hofer looks bad. How do you think it affects the Blues like retool stage? Because this is like an important, like we said, an important part of this process. Um, and we've sort of been operating under the assumption that the goaltending is kind of going to be like it's in good hands essentially. So like, do you think if we see just really poor play from here on out, like I said, probably more so from Joel Hofer because he's sort of more the variable here. Um, yeah, what do you think that means?
I don't think like if Joel Hofer, if Binnington it just can't be consistent, and if Hofer just is terrible from here until the rest of his NHL career, which would be awful because we like Joel Hofer. I don't think it entirely ruins the idea of the retool at all. I think a big part of that is organizationally. Organizationally, the Blues have historically been great at identifying young goaltending talent and developing that. Also, as we talked about in our last episode with Mike, be sure to check that out if you haven't already. There's some really great analysis there.
Yeah.
Colton Ellis is waiting in the wings and look awesome. And behind him on the depth chart is Vadim Zherenko, who is one of the highest touted goalie prospects, like a top probably 20 goalie prospect in the NHL. That the talent is still at least within him, you would think that it hasn't looked good for some time now, but perhaps they can find something new to turn that around. And even then, I still trust that the Blues will be able to go out and acquire, some of these older. A name isn't necessarily coming to mind, but I'm thinking like what the Wild have done with Philip Gustafson, who's been okay,
Mm-hmm.
or even the Jake Allen career arc. And no, in this case, we were the ones who broke Jake Allen, but I mean that isn't obviously entirely correct because man, he got some run. Anyways, this is getting off the rails. I don't think it entirely like ruins or sets back the retool at all, actually, because I think the Blues have earned the trust of developing goaltending. However, it definitely sets this year way back, as in this is going to be I don't want to call it a tanking season, but hard to watch.
Yeah, and to be clear, my optimism surrounding the Blues and my like prediction that they would like make the playoffs um, was built in large part on vibes and like just like
The
believing in
best
something.
sports stat there is.
Just like wanting to believe in something.
The
I was
second
I
best
was
sports stat there is.
That's right. So um, I'm not. I wouldn't be surprised like if it doesn't happen necessarily. I was just like, hey, I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna predict. So I mean, all that is to say, like, I agree. If something so important and so central to the Blues, I don't want to say success, but uh, like just central to their season performance last year. If that goes down, I think you're right. This season kind of is maybe a wash in that case. But in terms of the retool, you're right. Like there's reason for optimism beyond these two. If you want to hear more about particularly Colton Ellis, like Alex said, last week's episode we had on Mike Meyer, who does a fantastic job covering prospects. That was a really great discussion. So be sure to check that one out if you want to hear about all the Blues prospects. But um, in terms of like in terms of the wider retool, um, I don't think that like one season of poor play should throw a wrench in the works. So I think I agree with you that there's, like I said, reason for optimism beyond these two. But also, like even if Hofer's bad, I still want to like give him another shot. And that's again if he's bad, which he hasn't been terrible. I want to say, but if he, this is all hypothetical. So either way, I think it's worth giving him another shot, good or bad this season. So it's a lot of like ifs and like if this happens. So it's hard to have a whole lot of a whole lot of analysis about hypothetical situations. But I think it's worth discussing, if anything, just to put into context how important these two players are to this Blues team. So on the other side of that, what if the goaltending improves? What if they return to somewhere around the level that they were playing at last season, which was fantastic, and I think we said one of, if not like the best question mark goalie tandems in the league. Um, so if they get back there, like what could this team do? Like, do they have the legs to get back in it, make it interesting? Um, Alec, what do you think?
I think that yeah, it's definitely, as you said, was a strength of this team. So to quantify exactly what the level of last year for those who maybe don't remember, Joel Hofer last year had a 913 save percentage, which by the way, right now he is at a 903. That is not a huge disparity.
No.
Also, last year Hofer was 17th in the league per money puck, with 10.3 goals saved above expected. Jordan Binnington was at finished the year at a 913. Right now is an 886, so a lot higher to climb there for him. And also last year, Binnington was fifth in the league at 16.5 goals saved above expected per money puck. But so if the goaltending improves, and I'm not even saying if it improves to that level, I think if Hofer can level it out, honestly, I'm not really sure that Hofer has to improve. It's if it's just like if it looks better or if it feels better than the Ottawa game and some of his other performances, then I would say he's not really my worry. I think it's more so Binnington if he, like I said, the stats are also pretty bad. Most of his games have been like 3 or less goals, which is very manageable. If he can limit the amount of 4+ goal games, and I would say no more 8 goal games is a good goal for the season. Then yeah, I think this team can absolutely, maybe I don't know if go on a run is the wording I would choose for that, but
Yeah,
I think this team can absolutely like hang with anyone. And as I've said before, and Note News fans get
I know
ready to
what you're
hear
gonna
this
say.
for
I know what you're gonna say.
forever from me. Give me playoff Binnington in a chance. I don't care. That man in the biggest moments, he is he there's something inside him. Like there's he's such a level of competition that comes out of him,
Hmm.
which we've seen, in other aspects of his just personality, like
Yeah,
how he gets so much hate online. I'm not even going to get into that now because I like Binnington, but he's a competitor,
yeah.
and he's got that really like stellar save ability. So absolutely. If Binnington can turn his season around and just have more 3 goal, 2 goal, 1 goal nights, I'm here for it every day of the week, and I think the Blues are going to start winning a lot of games.
Yeah, I mean, sort of looking at Joel Hofer in particular, saying, like you said, his 903 save percentage isn't bad necessarily. He's above average when it comes to above league average for goalies when it comes to save percentage, as well as high danger save percentage and mid range save percentage. He's above average in all those metrics. He's sort of excelling in a way in mid range save percentage. Um, and he started the season off with 3 wins, followed by a tough outing against Ottawa, as we said, and then another loss to Utah. So, like, really, it's only a couple bad games here for Joel Hofer. And with a 5 game sample size, a good start or a bad start is going to throw those numbers off um, in a lot of ways. So, I mean, I think having both the good and the bad, like already, even in such a small sample size, you can still point to some things and say that they're interesting. So like in terms of his like where he is relative to league average after these 5 games, that is sort of like a tick in the plus column for him. But again, sort of like you were saying, I think if Jordan Binnington in particular can turn it around, that would be huge. Obviously, he's taking up the lion's share of the starts in goal for this team. So he's the one that we've sort of got our eye on more. But like I sort of hinted at earlier in the episode, I'm worried that this season is looking like too similar, essentially, to his 22-23 season, in a lot of ways. And so, I'm really hoping that that's not what we see. So,
Yeah,
and
I
again,
want.
like, yeah,
No, go ahead. I'll move
I
on
was just
after
gonna
this.
I was just gonna end this point with saying that um, everyone knows it. Judging goalies is hard because being a goaltender is hard, and it's so variant, player to player, start to start, season to season. It's just like, I don't know. It's like trying to read tea leaves, when you're trying to, um, especially with a sample size this small. So, um, that's sort of another disclaimer here, to keep in mind.
Yeah, to give a numbers explanation as to goalies are weird and hard to predict. Last year, seventh in the league in goals saved above expected, Linus Olmark. This year,
Hmm.
fifth worst in the league in goals saved above expected, Linus Olmark. It's not just the Blues; goalies are weird.
Goalies are
Um,
weird. I mean, he did have a Vezina like the year
yeah,
before, right?
and now he's the fifth worst goalie in the league per Money Puck's
Yeah,
that statistic. So,
yeah.
um, I want to contextualize some of these stats as well, and sort of give more essentially sides to the pluses of how this can turn around,
Hmm.
and then also I'm going to do it, John. I'm going to ask you a question on Note News.
No,
So we're getting serious today.
no, I can't do it.
So, I think there is something to be said about the lack of help that these goalies are getting, and I don't want to just say that like defense is bad, therefore it's defense fault. But there is
Hmm.
something to be said about just the lack of structure around the goaltending, especially in the defensive zone. So to start out, Joel Hofer, and most of these are going to be especially plus sides for Hofer. I think there's a little bit. Binnington's advanced analytics aren't quite as pretty, but
Hmm.
still, there's some signs pointing to good, and there's a lot of good pointing for Hofer.
Yeah.
So first of all, Hofer is the number one, and I should say these are all with the condition of a minimum 5 games played, which is the amount of games that Hofer's played, and is
Hmm.
about the amount that most backups have played at this point.
Yeah.
So it among goalies with 5 games played, Hofer is number one in the NHL with percents of unblocked shot attempts against. That means he is facing the most amount of unblocked shot attempts per game in the NHL.
Hmm.
That's a tough ask for a goalie, and he's got a 903 save percentage.
Right. Yeah.
905?
903.
903. Okay. Binnington's mark is not quite as not as helpful to constructing any analysis. It's at 46%, which is pretty league average. So
Hmm.
Hofer, however, has been put on an island more, is at least
Hmm.
a football term, or been left out to dry more, and is performing okay.
Hmm.
Furthermore, in one of the biggest issues that I remember watching early in Binnington's career was rebound control, and it seems to be something that he really mastered last year that led to a lot of his success. This year, Joel Hofer is fourth in the NHL, and Jordan Binnington is eighth in the NHL on rebounds per save. Once again, per money puck, per minute with among goalies with at least 5 games played. They
Hmm.
are both top 10 and top 8 goalies in limiting rebound chances, which is the best way to
Yeah.
limit easy tap in opportunities for the defense. Another stat here, looking at sort of I will call this an unlucky spectrum, although I really hate sports analysis that uses luck as an stat. But just
Hmm.
follow what I'm thinking here. So
Yeah.
I'll start with Binnington this time. This year, Binnington has allowed 3.28 goals against. That is
On
again with the
average.
start. Yeah, goals against average. That is again with the start giving up 8 goals.
Hmm.
So a goalie that gave up 8 goals has a 3.28 GAA. which isn't even like an awful GAA. It's like very much like baseline.
Sure.
You'd expect that out of the 50th percentile goalie in the NHL. His expected goals against is 2.96. So there is at least a little bit of regression to the mean that could be predicted there.
Mhm.
Hofer's, on the other hand, he has a 3.33 goals against average. His expected goals against, 2.49. That is almost a full goal of expected difference. So you could say that it's just Hofer has really not been saving shots that he should have.
Mhm.
I think of this as more that he's taking so many unblocked shot attempts. He's really getting left out, and he still has like a fine mark. Like there's a lot of room for growth for Hofer, especially.
Yeah.
Finally, the you mentioned how he's been shining on medium danger shots, even
Mhm.
on high danger shots. Joel Hofer is sixth in save percentage. Bear with me here. I'll explain this. This was difficult to parse out. So, sixth in the NHL on save percentage on high danger unblocked shots. So that would be like essentially shots that should be goals. Joel
Mhm.
Hofer has a save percentage of 857, which is sixth in the NHL.
Mhm.
857 save percentage is bad, but this is like right down the alley, no one on you. It's just you
Sure.
and this is essentially a shootout. He has an
Yeah.
857 save percentage in conditions that could be considered a shootout. That's
Mhm.
phenomenal. Additionally, on more of an expected metric, he is ninth in the NHL on high danger unblocked shots above expected, on save percentage on high danger unblocked shots above expected. So still the advanced metrics, the regular metrics, all of it are pointing to say that Joe Hofer has been doing an outstanding, exceptional job in the very difficult task he's been asked. And even Jordan Binnington has been potentially, I don't want to say getting a little unlucky here, but has been limiting the damage and limiting rebounds, and therefore should be having a little bit better of a season than we've seen so far. So, all of this to say, I actually want to return to a question that you asked me a couple weeks back. Is it time to see Joel Hofer start to get more of a share of games played here? Right now, Binnington has 11 games played to Hofer's 5, so that's about 2-1. Could we see this be more of a 60-40, 55-45, a dare I say even 50-50 split? If anything, for at least, and I'll sort of give my answer before I ask you. I think at least for the time being, for the time that Thomas is out and Bannister's trying new things with lines, the fact is that Hofer has arguably been outplaying Binnington so far. I think you could at least give Hofer some run here before the new year, but before games really start to matter, before the pressure is on, and sort of ride the hot hand here. Essentially, what I'm saying I would propose is let Hofer play probably 50% of the games to let Binnington get a breather, get settled into the season, get Robert Thomas back, get Philip Broberg back, take it from there. And then at that point, you'd probably give the keys back to Binnington because he's the goalie, he's your franchise guy, he's the one getting paid, and he's the one you're going to start in the playoffs and the one you should start in the playoffs. But for the time being, I would start, I'm there, that I would start Joel Hofer for like a month, probably not 2, but maybe 2 months, not more than that, but at least for a little bit. That's how I feel. So what do you think about this? Do you think Joel Hofer can entirely take over, or is it? Yeah, how would you approach this?
I
Did
think
it?
you did it. Congrats, man. That I bet your like your browser is running at like full capacity with all these tabs of different information that you've pulled to weave into this narrative that you've crafted. No, you made some good points there for sure, and I do think more of my concern with the goaltending is on Jordan Binnington. I think that's sort of my takeaway, especially from our discussion today. Not just the stats, but talking through with my boy. Is that Joel Hofer actually does look not like he looks okay. He doesn't look too bad. And so I think I like the approach that you're suggesting. And I could tell, this might be where you were going with it. And I think that I would agree that especially right now while he looks good, uh, and Benner maybe doesn't look so good. I'm like completely fine with Joel Hofer taking on a bigger workload, and I think he should. Like looking at like so he started his first game on October 10th, waited 7 days to play against the Islanders, waited 2 days to play against um, Carolina, another 10 days before he started against Ottawa, and that was the big blow up start. Um, and then another uh, quick math here, 9 days, I believe, to play against in his last game against Utah. I mean, that's just like it's just a lot of time,
Difficult
uh,
deployment, yeah.
difficult deployment for on Hofer's side to get into a groove, and then on Binnington's side to be like trying to play so much essentially. And so I think I think why not see what you can get out of this guy, especially right now while two key players are injured, and while another key player, Jordan Binnington, isn't quite performing where you need him to. Um, why not give Joel Hofer a run? I think it's more likely that he would be the goalie of the future than Jordan Binnington. Like I'm thinking long term. Like I think it is more likely. I mean, Joel Hofer's just a younger guy and he's good. I don't know. Maybe we could debate that another time, but I see him as a very viable option for like a long term option in net. And so I would want to see if that's something he could handle, like getting a bigger share of the starts. And again, while he's performing like he is, sort of how you broke down all those fancy numbers. This guy and his numbers. Um, this hockey nerd over here broke it down. uh, I do think that all that is to say, yes, I agree. Hofer should probably get a bigger share of the starts.
How long would you let that run?
Um, I would say like why not finish out the year that way, right? Like,
Wow.
I mean, I don't know, like, so my thought process is orienting this around the injury timeline for Robert Thomas and Philip Broberg. I think it would be a good idea to see if starting Joel Hofer more can maybe get you back on track while these guys are out, right? And see if that works. Um, See what you get there. Um, but then at the same time, like if they're still struggling, I would still want to see what Hofer looks like with both of these guys back. So um, maybe start soon and see if he can get you back on track, like I said. But then also, I don't know, maybe a couple weeks of a lot of Hofer after they kind of come back, and you see if maybe with a little more help he looks even better. Um, but I think keeping the injury timeline of those two very key, very important players in mind, just sort of doing it around that is sort of my thought process there. What about you?
Hmm. The only comparison I will make here is the other contender for what used to be at least the best goaltending tandem outside of St. Louis, um, was of course in Boston.
Yeah,
And so in 22-23, that year where they were the best team ever, Olmark started 48 games to Swayman's 33, which is a 60-40 split, almost like mathematically about as exact as you can get. Last year, it was a 43 games for Swayman to 39 for Olmark, which is almost 50-50. So, and that's another team that knows how to use deployment well. So I think there's something to be said about not just making Binnington the de facto 65-75% starter just because he's got the contract. I think there's you'd like to think at least that the Blues could learn from a team that well, even though it isn't going so well right now, my heart still yearns for the loss of Jim Montgomery, but that's way too deep into this. You'd think that the Blues could learn from perhaps their former coach that maybe there's something to not just sticking with the guy that you plan on keeping long term and putting your team that you have right now in the best position to succeed. Which I think if you ask both of us here, it's to give Joel Hofer more time.
Yeah, and I think he's earned it as well. It's not just
Mm-hmm.
like it's not just do it for the heck of it. It is he has looked good. He looked good last season, and looks like when you're taking the full body of work, has looked uh, a lot of the time like the better goalie. Yeah, I think he's earned it. However, he has not made a crazy diving save with his stick with his paddle, and that was crazy. This was against the Washington Capitals, right?
Yep.
Um, yeah, a puck came down the ice. For those that somehow haven't seen it, Binnington was trying to play it, sort of.
Go watch the clip. Like, just go
Yeah,
watch
go
the
watch
clip.
it against the
You can
boards, and
describe it, but it's
yeah.
worth it.
Do you think he misplayed it, or did you think it took a weird bounce off the boards?
I think it
Binnington.
took. I think it took a weird bounce. I don't
That's what
think
I think.
he's
So yeah,
very steady with his stick. Yeah.
right. That was the way I saw it too. But basically, just wide open net. I don't know how. Like it's just crazy. Like you said, he's got that ability to make like stellar saves. Like I think the proper sports analytic term is he's got that dog in him. Um, and did not give up on the play, and that was really cool to see. And at that point, it was still a game. It was like 1-1, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
at that point. So
Mm-hmm.
um,
He's
we
got the
are
dog in him.
big Bennington fans here. I just think it was worth talking about
And
this kind of
like
stuff today.
to soapbox for 20 seconds. He
Yeah,
does like one of this like every year. Like
yeah,
every year there's a highlight of Binnington making the save of the year and he's still the most like hated and underappreciated player in the entire league. He's been
yeah. It's
I'll
annoying.
end it now before I get too into it, but he is one of the 10 best goalies of since 2020 and it's just he plays in St. Louis, which is a town that doesn't get talked about on the national media stage. And now I'm getting way too far into it.
Yeah, no,
I
I
like him.
agree. I like Bennington, and I agree the hate is unwarranted and then just kind of way overblown, honestly. So, do you think, last question, do you think he should be Team Canada's number one goalie in the Four Nations
Yes,
faceoff?
yes,
The
no
answer is
doubt,
yes. There is not a better option.
no
Jordan
doubt.
Bitt, like not just because he's like the best they've got and the rest are bad, but he is like one of the few good Canadian goalies right now. Like your other options are what, Aiden Hill or Stuart Skinner, um,
Yeah, like come
who
on,
or yeah, who or Sam Montembeau, who has looked okay, but like Jordan Binnington is the guy, and I don't know how this is a debate. Um,
for real. Like he has the track record. Don't get
yeah,
me
like
started,
like you
John.
said,
Don't get
in
me
the
started.
playoffs, he's gotten it done. This is like a playoff at like I don't know why it's a debate.
You want Stuart Skinner, who's been benched like 4 separate times on a team with Connor McDavid, or Sam Montembeau, who just hasn't really shown much up to this point, or the
Well,
Stanley Cup and arguably could have, maybe should have been Conn Smythe winner in 2019.
yeah, the Four Nations
Come on.
face-off, for those of you that may not know, will be in February. It'll be in place of the All-Star break this year, and it's like the first best-on-best tournament we've had in a while. It'll be the U.S., Canada, Finland, and Sweden, I believe, are the other two. Um, so that'll be really cool. I think we should do some Four Nations face-off coverage maybe when we get a little closer. I think that'd be a lot of fun, especially if we've got guys like Binner or Robert Thomas that get in on the tournament. That would be really cool. So we'll do some of that. Um, yeah, we're gonna do some. I mean, the Blues have got some cool stuff going on this season. Winter Classic as well this season, December 31st against Chicago. Will Joe Hofer start that game?
No.
No.
Gonna go
Um,
out on a limb and say no.
we'll do some fun Winter Classic stuff. All that is a ways away. But for now, we're gonna continue bringing y'all Blues content. And as we said at the top, starting live streaming soon. So be sure to tune in with that. That's going to be really fun. And sort of our best way to engage with you, the listeners, the viewers, yet. So in real time, it'll be really cool. So be sure to look out for the announcement about that. We'll try to get the word out there about, again, when we do that. But we're really excited. So the best way to follow along with us and get any updates like that is to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow and rate the podcast wherever you listen, and follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Note News Pod, all the socials. Follow along with us there. So we really appreciate all that. We are like approaching ish 250 subscribers on YouTube. So if y'all want to get us there and get us to 300, we really appreciate that. It's been a lot of fun, and we really appreciate everything that's come so far. As I said, that's where you can find us. That'll do it for us on this episode of Note News. We'll see you next time, and let's go Blues.
Let's go Blues.